I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The HOA president chained my heart-patient daughter to our porch and called it enforcement. In her excuse, she said she was allowed to secure offending property. Little did she know the judge would hear her say, "I'd do it again on tape and bury her for good." But let me start at the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from today. The air inside my patrol cruiser felt stale and cold, artificial air pushing against the brutal 95-degree heat of late July. My shift had just ended. 25 years in law enforcement, the last 5 serving as chief of police, and still, the quiet drive home remained the best part of my day. The streets of Maple Creek were calm, wrapped in that predictable suburban rhythm I'd grown to appreciate. Lawn sprinklers clicked on in perfect sequence. Somewhere, a mower hummed steadily. Children's bicycles rested abandoned in driveways, reminders of carefree afternoons. Across from the corner, Mr. Finley rocked slowly in his usual chair, eyes scanning the street like he always did. Everything about our neighborhood suggested safety, stability, order. That was what we paid for, not just with property taxes, but with those ridiculous HOA fees that promised harmony and order. I turned into our cul-de-sac and saw our home waiting at the end of the lane. A neat colonial house, white siding glowing under the sun, framed by black shutters. Nicole's rose bushes decorated the walkway, bursting with vibrant color. It looked peaceful, perfect even. Then I heard the scream. It wasn't the playful shriek of children playing tag. It wasn't the quick cry of a scraped knee. This sound was fragile and desperate, thin and sharp enough to slice through the peaceful afternoon like shattered glass. It was my daughter. Time seemed to freeze as dread surged through my body. I slammed the cruiser into park halfway up the driveway and bolted out before the engine even shut down. My heart pounded violently while my eyes searched frantically for the source. Then I saw her. Emma lay on her side across the wooden porch floor. The dark-stained planks absorbed the sun's heat, radiating intense warmth beneath her small body. She barely moved, trembling faintly. A metallic glint caught my eye, a thick steel chain wrapped tightly around her chest and arm. The chain stretched across the porch pillar and ended in a heavy padlock. Her skin looked pale, her lips tinted a frightening blue. On her wrist, her medical heart monitor blinked bright red, releasing a shrill alarm that echoed in my ears. For one terrifying second, the world collapsed around me. The police chief inside me disappeared, replaced by a father drowning in rage and panic. My instinct screamed to destroy whoever had done this. But years of training forced that fury into a locked corner of my mind. I sprinted up the porch steps and dropped beside her. "Emma," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Daddy's here. You're safe." Her eyelids fluttered weakly. She tried to speak, but only dry breaths escaped. I touched her forehead. She was burning with heat. The chain squeezed tightly around her torso, restricting her breathing. I followed the chain to the pillar. The padlock gleamed under the sunlight. "Brand new. Deliberate. It's a violation." The voice floated from behind me, cheerful and almost polite. The tone clashed so horribly with the scene that it felt surreal. I turned slowly. Karen Sloan stood just beyond the rose bushes. She wore a perfectly pressed linen suit and carried her usual clipboard like a symbol of authority. Her bright smile sat unnaturally calm on her face. "The play structure violates subsection 9, clause C," she explained casually, pointing toward Emma's blue plastic slide. "It must remain in the backyard. You've received multiple warnings." My brain struggled to process her words while Emma struggled to breathe beside me. I stood slowly, fury vibrating through my entire body. "Did you do this?" I asked quietly. Karen shrugged slightly, her smile never fading. "The bylaws allow enforcement measures," she replied smoothly. "The slide is the property in violation. The child was attached to it. Temporary restraint until you return home." The calmness in her explanation shattered something inside me. Emma's monitor screamed louder. The blue shade on her lips deepened. Heat stroke combined with her heart condition created a lethal situation. I knelt again beside my daughter, blocking Karen from my sight. Right now, Emma was the only thing that mattered. But deep inside, a chilling realization formed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was cruelty, and Karen Sloan had just declared war. Emma's medical condition had always made us cautious. She was diagnosed with long QT syndrome when she was 3. It meant her heart rhythm could become dangerously unstable under stress or heat. Nicole and I monitored everything: medication schedules, hydration, activity levels, even emotional stress. Her wearable monitor tracked her oxygen and heart rhythm constantly, sending alerts to our phones. Except our phones never rang. As I rushed inside searching for Nicole, I quickly understood why. The house felt unnaturally silent. The microwave clock blinked off. The Wi-Fi router showed no lights. The circuit breaker panel hung open. Someone had cut the power. I found Nicole inside her home office, headphones covering her ears as she worked on transcription files. The room felt warm and stuffy. She hadn't heard the alarm outside. I tore the headphones off. "Nicole, Emma's outside." Her face drained of color instantly. Training replaced panic as she sprinted toward the porch before I finished explaining. I ran toward the garage and grabbed my emergency bolt cutters, my hands shaking violently as I raced back. By then, Nicole was already assessing Emma. "Heart rate 180, she said urgently. "Breathing shallow. She's crashing." I placed the cutters around the chain and squeezed. The metal resisted, then snapped open. Emma was free, but barely conscious. "Get the AED," Nicole ordered. I dashed inside again, grabbing the defibrillator from our emergency kit. When I returned, Nicole had already opened Emma's shirt and prepared her chest. The AED analyzed her heart rhythm. Its robotic voice echoed calmly. "Shock advised." Nicole pressed the button. Emma's small body jerked violently. Then silence followed. Nicole immediately resumed chest compressions while I called emergency dispatch, delivering the details in a steady voice that didn't match the terror clawing through me. Sirens approached quickly. Paramedics flooded the porch moments later, taking control as they loaded Emma onto a stretcher. Nicole climbed into the ambulance without hesitation. As I moved toward my car to follow, I noticed Karen still standing near the roses, staring with stunned disbelief. Our eyes locked. I didn't say anything, but I made a silent promise. This wasn't over. The drive to the hospital blurred into a tunnel of flashing lights and silent prayers. I followed the ambulance so closely I could practically feel the vibration of its siren through my steering wheel. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every second stretched into something unbearable. Inside that ambulance were the two people who gave my life meaning. By the time I reached the emergency entrance, paramedics were already rushing Emma inside while Nicole stayed glued to her side, barking vital information to the doctors as they moved. I tried to follow, but hospital staff gently stopped me at the doors, guiding me toward the waiting area reserved for families. That was the moment everything felt helpless. Inside the emergency room, time lost all structure. Doctors and nurses moved with surgical precision, while Nicole and I were reduced to observers, clinging to each other as machines and specialists fought for our daughter's life. Hours crawled by. Eventually, Detective Peterson from my department arrived to take my statement. He was a solid investigator, calm, methodical, dependable. I gave him every detail I could remember, stripping the event down to raw facts, even though my emotions were boiling underneath. I described the chain, the padlock, Karen standing on my lawn. Her words. I named her directly as the suspect. Peterson listened carefully, his expression tightening the more he heard. But I could already see the concern forming in his eyes. This case was not simple. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She held influence. She had connections. And cases involving local politics and property interests often became slow, messy battles. Near midnight, the doctor finally entered the waiting room. His scrubs were wrinkled. His face carried exhaustion. "She's stable," he said. Those two words nearly dropped me to my knees. He explained Emma had suffered cardiac arrest triggered by heat stroke and severe stress. They managed to restore her heart rhythm, but she remained in critical condition inside the pediatric intensive care unit. Nicole immediately went to her bedside. I followed quietly, standing near the doorway as we watched our daughter surrounded by machines and wires. Seeing her like that burned something permanent into my memory. That night, Nicole refused to leave the hospital. Around midnight, she convinced me to go home, shower, rest, and prepare for what was coming next. I didn't argue, not because I wanted to leave, but because I knew she was right. When I walked back into our house, it felt hollow and foreign. Yellow crime scene tape still blocked off the porch. The quiet humming of restored electricity couldn't mask the unease crawling through every room. I tried sitting down. I couldn't. The police chief inside me refused to stay still. The father inside me demanded answers. By morning, Nicole returned home to change clothes and grab supplies. But instead of resting, she sat down in her office and opened her laptop with surgical focus. Karen has been targeting us for 2 years, she said quietly. This wasn't random. Nicole began pulling every email, every violation notice, every fine, every HOA letter we had ever received. She built spreadsheets, timelines, and financial tracking logs. She analyzed patterns like she was reconstructing a crime scene. Watching her work was both heartbreaking and inspiring. After about an hour, she froze. "Tim," she said slowly, her voice tightening. "You need to see this." She turned her screen toward me. The HOA financial records showed massive legal expenses, far beyond what a simple homeowners association would normally require. Monthly payments were being made to a high-end real estate law firm specializing in land acquisitions and development contracts. "That's not normal," I said. Nicole nodded. "Look deeper." She pulled out a recent HOA newsletter Karen had personally delivered to our house. Inside, folded between the pages, Nicole had found something unusual the night before. She unfolded the document. It carried the letterhead of a luxury development company proposing to purchase every home inside our neighborhood as part of a complete redevelopment project. Attached to the letter was a neighborhood map. Each house was marked either green or red. Green meant cooperative. Red meant resistant. Our house was circled multiple times in thick red ink. Beside it, written in Karen's handwriting, were chilling words: primary obstacle. Initiate aggressive compliance protocol. The room felt suddenly colder. All the fines, the constant inspections, the harassment, none of it had been about rules. It had been about forcing us out. Nicole pointed toward the developer's board member list at the bottom of the document. One name jumped out immediately: Councilman David Miller. I had crossed paths with him before. He was known for cozy relationships with developers and aggressive city expansion deals. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. It was organized corruption. We needed proof. Physical documents could be dismissed or explained away by expensive lawyers. We needed someone who had witnessed Karen chaining Emma. There was only one person who might have seen everything: Mr. Finley. I walked across the street that afternoon and found him sitting in his rocking chair like always. But his posture looked heavier. Troubled. "Tim," he said softly. I saw her. Relief flooded through me. Finley described watching Karen approach our yard carrying a large bag. He saw her confront Emma. He saw her wrap the chain around my daughter and lock it to the porch pillar. His testimony could destroy Karen's defense. He promised to give a formal statement the next morning. For the first time since the attack, I felt hope. That hope died before sunrise. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert from our doorbell camera. I pulled up the live feed. A hooded figure stood near my truck. Even the grainy night vision, I recognized the posture instantly. Karen. She crouched beside my front tire briefly, then stood and walked away. But instead of leaving, she crossed the street toward Finley's house. I watched her place something on his porch before disappearing into the darkness. By 7 a.m., Finley called. His voice shook uncontrollably. "There was a dead bird on my doorstep," he whispered. Its neck was snapped. There was a note. It said if I talked, my family would be next. Then he hung up. Witness intimidation. A felony. And Karen had committed it without hesitation. I watched the security footage again, zooming in until I caught a brief moment where Karen looked directly at the camera lens. She wasn't hiding. She wanted me to see it. She believed she was untouchable. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. This was no longer just about justice. This was about dismantling someone who thought power placed her above consequences. The next morning, I walked into the precinct not as chief, but as a victim. I closed the door behind Deputy Chief Marcus Thorne and told him everything. The attack, the conspiracy, the developer deal, the witness threat. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he simply said, "She belongs in prison." I nodded. "But I can't run this case," I said. "I'm recusing myself." The words hurt more than I expected. Every instinct screamed to lead the investigation personally. But doing so would give Karen's lawyers ammunition to claim bias. Marcus accepted control of the official case. Then I asked him to bring in 2 detectives I trusted completely. Maria Diaz, our digital investigation genius. Sam Chun, surveillance and undercover specialist. When they arrived, I explained the truth. The official investigation would move forward by the book. But off the record, we needed something stronger. We needed Karen to confess. We needed her arrogance to expose her. And that's when Diaz asked the question that shaped everything. What does a bully want most? I answered immediately. She wants to see me broken. Diaz smiled. Then let her believe she won. If Karen believed she had defeated me, if she thought the strongest resistance in her path had stepped aside, she would become careless. People like her didn't hide their cruelty when they felt powerful. They celebrated it. And that was exactly what we needed. The first step was controlling the public narrative. I contacted a local news reporter I trusted. Off the record, I explained that a severe family emergency had forced me to step away from my duties. By the evening broadcast, the headline was already running. Police Chief Tim Jackson announces extended leave following family crisis. The report remained respectful and vague, which was exactly what we wanted. It painted me as a broken father retreating from public life. Next came the personal layer of deception. I logged into my rarely used social media account and posted a photo of Emma and me from the previous summer, standing at the edge of a lake, laughing in bright sunlight. Nicole helped craft every word of the caption. The last few days have changed everything for me. I've realized my family needs me more than my career does. With a heavy heart, I'm announcing my retirement from law enforcement effective immediately. Within minutes, messages flooded in. Support, sympathy, shock. I ignored them all. Instead, Nicole and I watched the private Maple Creek HOA online group through credentials a trusted neighbor quietly provided us. For nearly 24 hours, the group was filled with speculation and concern. Then Karen posted. Her message overflowed with fake compassion. She expressed sorrow for my family, praised my years of service, and wished Emma a speedy recovery. It was revoltingly sweet. But an hour later, she posted again. This time, it was official. Due to recent developments and emerging opportunities for community growth, I am calling an urgent private HOA board meeting to discuss Maple Creek's future. Attendance is mandatory. Nicole looked at me slowly. She's making her move, she said. I nodded. She thinks the last obstacle is gone. The next phase depended on technology. Detective Chun arrived at my house carrying a small cardboard box. Inside was something deceptively simple, a smoke detector identical to the ones installed throughout the HOA clubhouse. Except this one contained a concealed high-definition camera and a powerful microphone capable of capturing conversations across an entire room. It transmitted encrypted live video to our monitoring equipment. Our inside contact was the HOA secretary. She had despised Karen for years, but had always been too frightened to oppose her publicly. After quietly learning pieces of what happened to Emma, she agreed to help. Her job was straightforward. Prepare the clubhouse meeting room, as usual. Replace the existing smoke detector with our modified version. The meeting location was a public association facility, not a private residence. That detail mattered legally. Conversations held there had limited expectation of privacy, especially among board members conducting official association business. By late afternoon, We received a simple text message from her, device installed. They're arriving. That night, humidity clung heavily to the air as dark clouds gathered overhead. A storm threatened to break. We parked 2 blocks away, inside an unmarked service van Shin borrowed through family connections. From the outside, it looked like a standard plumbing company vehicle. Inside, it held an array of screens, recording devices, and secure signal receivers powered by a silent generator. The van smelled faintly of coffee and electrical equipment. Nicole sat beside me, her fingers tightly interlocked with mine. Marcus stood behind us, arms folded, watching quietly. Diaz and Chin monitored signal clarity and recording stability. Then the camera feed flickered alive. The clubhouse boardroom appeared in crisp, wide-angle view. Karen sat proudly at the head of the conference table, posture radiating victory. 2 men she frequently used as unofficial security leaned casually near the doorway. Beside her sat a sharply dressed man wearing an expensive suit and a predatory smile. The developer's representative. Audio activata moments late. We could hear the soft clink of glassware and the rustle of paperwork. Karen began speaking. "Thank you all for attending on such short notice," she said smoothly. "As you know, our community recently experienced unfortunate disruption. However, thanks to diligent enforcement of our standards, that issue has been resolved." Several board members nodded approvingly. The developer representative leaned forward. "Karen, our company deeply appreciates your aggressive handling of the final holdout," he said. "Without your commitment, tonight's proposal would not be possible." He slid a thick folder toward her. These documents outline final purchase terms for the entire subdivision. Karen opened the folder slowly. Her eyes widened with greedy satisfaction. Nicole leaned closer to the monitor, whispering, "She's getting paid." Look at her reaction. Diaz zoomed into the contract page displayed briefly on camera. There it was, a secondary compensation clause. Karen would receive a 10% facilitation fee upon successful completion of property acquisition. Nicole inhaled sharply beside me. "This was never about rules," she whispered. One nervous board member cleared his throat. "What if the Jackson family refuses to sell?" he asked cautiously. "What if he comes back to work? What if he fights this?" Karen laughed. It was an ugly, sharp sound that sliced through the room. "He's not coming back," she said smugly. "I broke him." My grip tightened around Nicole's hand. Karen leaned forward, her expression darkening with pride. "You have to understand people like him. They think they're above rules. They think they're stronger than community standards." She paused, savoring the attention. "You don't just find people like that. You take away what they care about most." The developer representative nodded approvingly. Karen lowered her voice, speaking like she was sharing a clever secret. "That little girl, with all her medical problems, she was a liability. Emergency vehicles showing up repeatedly lowers property perception. It hurts market value." Nicole flinched beside me. I felt rage surge through my chest, but I forced myself to stay still. Karen continued. "I sent a message, and he got it. He ran away. He quit his job. If he hadn't..." She leaned back in her chair, smiling coldly. "I'd do it again. I swear I would. I'd chain her to that porch again myself if it meant securing this contract." The van fell silent except for the hum of equipment. Chun immediately began duplicating the recording across multiple encrypted drives. Marcus looked at me slowly. "That's confession, conspiracy, motive, everything," he said quietly. "We can arrest her tonight." Rain suddenly began hammering the van roof as the storm finally broke overhead. I stared at the screen, watching Karen celebrate her cruelty like it was a business victory. "No," I said calmly. Marcus frowned slightly. "We arrest her now. She hides behind lawyers," I explained. "She claims manipulation. She claims private conversation. She becomes a quiet headline that fades away." I turned toward him. "I want everyone in Maple Creek to see who she really is." Nicole squeezed my hand gently. "The general HOA meeting," she said softly. I nodded. "That's where she falls." The next 48 hours became preparation. Marcus quietly secured arrest warrants through trusted channels. Diaz edited the footage into legally admissible segments. Chun arranged secure playback equipment inside the clubhouse audio system through cooperation from our secretary contact. Meanwhile, Karen publicly announced the upcoming general community meeting. She marketed it as a groundbreaking announcement about Maple Creek's bright future. Residents filled online discussion boards with curiosity and excitement. None of them suspected they were about to witness something far darker. Saturday arrived bright and clear. The storm had washed the air clean, leaving behind a deceptively peaceful afternoon. The clubhouse filled quickly. Neighbors chatted casually, expecting landscaping proposals or recreational upgrades. Karen stood confidently near the podium, wearing a sharp red suit designed to project authority and success. Her two hired enforcers lingered near the entrance, watching the crowd carefully. Emma was safe at Nicole's parents' house, far from everything about to unfold. Karen tapped the microphone, preparing to begin her speech. That was when the clubhouse doors opened. Nicole and I stepped inside together. The entire room fell silent. Karen's confident smile flickered for a split second before she forced it back into place. "Tim," she said carefully, "I thought you retired." I walked slowly down the center aisle. "Just finishing unfinished business," I replied calmly. Karen's expression hardened slightly. She gestured toward her security men. "This is a private meeting," she snapped quietly. "Escort him out." The two men began moving toward me. I gave a small nod toward the back of the room. Diaz pressed a remote control. The clubhouse lights dimmed, and the projector screen behind Karen flickered to life. At first, only static flickered across the white surface. Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Several residents turned in their chairs, trying to figure out what was happening. Karen spun around sharply. "What is this?" she demanded. No one answered her. Then the footage began to play. The image sharpened into the HOA boardroom from 2 nights earlier. Karen appeared on screen, seated at the head of the table, smiling with absolute confidence. The developer's representative sat beside her, sliding the contract folder forward. A ripple of confusion moved through the audience. Karen's face drained of color as she slowly turned back toward the crowd, then back to the screen. Her recorded voice filled the clubhouse speakers. "Thanks to diligent enforcement of our standards, that issue has been resolved." Several neighbors exchanged uncertain glances. Then the video continued. The contract appeared on screen. The compensation clause froze momentarily in a zoomed frame. 10% facilitation fee. Gasps erupted across the room. Karen's breathing became visibly uneven. "Turn that off," she snapped, trying to regain authority. "This is illegal. This is fabricated. Shut it down immediately." No one moved. The video resumed. Her laughter echoed through the clubhouse. Cold, sharp, unmistakable. "He's not coming back," her recorded voice said smugly. "I broke him." A wave of stunned silence rolled across the audience. People began turning fully toward Karen now, studying her with disbelief and horror. Nicole stood beside me, her posture rigid, her jaw clenched tightly as she listened. The next segment played. "You don't just find people like that," Karen's voice continued on screen. "You take away what they care about most." Someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God." Then came the moment that shattered everything. That little girl with all her medical problems, she was a liability. The room exploded into outrage. Several residents stood up simultaneously. A mother in the front row covered her mouth, tears forming instantly. A man shouted, "You chained child." Karen lunged toward the projector, grabbing for the equipment. Chun, standing quietly near the sidewall, stepped forward just enough to block her path without touching her. "Move," Karen hissed. The video continued playing behind her. "I'd chain her to that porch again myself if it meant securing this contract." The words echoed through the clubhouse like a gunshot. Karen froze. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then chaos erupted. Residents shouted over one another. Some demanded explanations. Others hurled accusations. Several board members stood up and backed away from Karen's table like she was contagious. Karen turned toward me, fury twisting her face into something barely human. "You did this," she spat. I stepped forward slowly, keeping my voice calm and steady. "No," I said. "You did this. We just let people hear it." Her composure collapsed completely. "You think you've won?" she screamed. "You think these people care about you? They care about property values. They care about money. I was protecting this neighborhood." Her voice cracked into something frantic, desperate, and unhinged. "You were the problem. Your sick kid, your ambulance visits, your chaos. You were dragging this place down." Nicole stepped forward before I could react. "My daughter is not chaos," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "She's a child who nearly died because of you." Karen sneered, stepping closer to Nicole. "She's weak," Karen snapped. "And weak people ruin strong communities." The room fell into stunned silence again. That was when Marcus moved. He stepped out from the back of the crowd, badge already in his hand. "Karen Mitchell," he announced clearly, his voice cutting through the noise. "You are under arrest for felony child endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud, witness intimidation, and multiple counts of abuse of authority." Karen stared at him in disbelief. "You can't arrest me," she said breathlessly. "You have no idea who I know. I will bury every single one of you in lawsuits." Marcus didn't flinch. "You can discuss that with the district attorney." He nodded toward the uniformed officers who had quietly entered behind him. Karen's two hired enforcers stepped forward defensively, but several residents shouted at them to stand down. The social pressure inside the room shifted instantly. They hesitated, then slowly backed away from her. Karen's confidence shattered as reality closed in. "You think this ends with me?" she screamed as officers moved closer. "This entire deal is bigger than you. The council approved it. The developers approved it. You're all pawns." Marcus reached for her wrists. Karen jerked violently, trying to pull away. For a brief moment, she thrashed wildly, knocking over a chair and nearly losing her balance. "Get your hands off me," she shrieked. Two officers stepped in, securing her arms firmly but professionally. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the clubhouse, a sound that felt final. Karen continued screaming as they led her toward the exit. Threats, insults, desperate attempts to reclaim power through volume alone. But no one listened anymore. Residents parted silently, creating a path toward the doors. Some stared in shock. Others glared with open hatred. As Karen passed me, she leaned closer, her voice dropping into a venomous whisper. "This isn't over," she said. "People like me don't stay down." I met her stare without blinking. "People like you always think that," I replied quietly. She was dragged outside into the bright afternoon sunlight, her shouting fading as patrol cars closed around her. The clubhouse doors shut behind them, and for the first time in days, the room felt like it could breathe again. The aftermath was messy, emotional, and overwhelming. Residents bombarded us with apologies. Several people admitted they had suspected Karen's tactics for years, but had been too afraid to challenge her. Others simply stood nearby, offering quiet support that said more than words ever could. The HOA board dissolved on the spot. Emergency leadership elections were scheduled. The development contract was immediately suspended pending full criminal investigation. Nicole finally exhaled deeply beside me, like she had been holding her breath for days. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head gently. "We did it," I said. That evening, we drove straight to the hospital. Emma was still asleep when we entered her room. Machines beeped softly in steady rhythm. Her small hand rested against the blanket, pale but warm. Nicole sat beside her and brushed her hair back gently. "She's stronger than all of this," Nicole said softly. I nodded, pulling a chair closer to the bed. For the first time since the nightmare began, the weight pressing against my chest loosened slightly. Not gone, but lighter. And as I sat there watching my daughter breathe, I realized something quietly powerful. Karen had tried to take control through fear. But fear only wins when people stay silent. Karen's arrest triggered a chain reaction that rippled far beyond Maple Creek. Within days, local investigators uncovered financial records linking the development company to multiple questionable land acquisitions across the county. Subpoenas followed. Bank accounts were frozen. Emails surfaced showing coordinated pressure campaigns against homeowners in several neighborhoods. Councilman David Miller publicly denied involvement at first, but the evidence against him mounted quickly. Financial disclosures revealed undisclosed payments routed through shell consulting firms tied directly to the development deal. Within 3 weeks, he resigned from office. Criminal charges followed shortly afterward. Karen's trial began 4 months later. The courtroom overflowed on the first day. Reporters lined the hallway. Residents from Maple Creek filled nearly every available seat, many of them still carrying visible guilt for ignoring warning signs for so long. Nicole and I sat quietly behind the prosecution table, holding hands. Karen entered, escorted by deputies, wearing a gray suit that attempted to project dignity but failed to hide the strain carved across her face. Her confidence had not disappeared completely. People like her rarely surrendered pride easily, but the arrogance that once defined her had cracked into something brittle and defensive. The prosecution built their case methodically. The security footage of Emma chained to our porch was played first. Several jurors visibly recoiled. One wiped away tears before the video even finished. Mr. Finley eventually found the courage to testify. He described everything he witnessed that afternoon, including the intimidation threat left on his porch. His voice shook at times, but he never looked away from the jury. Then came the clubhouse recording. Karen's own voice filled the courtroom speakers, repeating the words she could never take back. "I'd chain her to that porch again myself if it meant securing this contract." Her defense team attempted to argue exaggeration, emotional stress, and illegal recording methods. But the prosecution dismantled each argument with precise legal clarity. The clubhouse qualified as a shared administrative facility. The recording captured official association discussions tied directly to financial decision-making. The jury watched Karen's recorded confession twice. They deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty on all major charges. Karen received a sentence totaling 22 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 15. The developer's executives faced separate federal fraud indictments, and multiple HOA regulatory reforms were passed statewide in response to the case. Maple Creek became a landmark example in property rights legal training seminars. But none of that mattered as much as the moment that came nearly 6 months after the trial ended. Emma finally came home from the hospital. The day felt surreal. Nicole and I spent hours preparing her room, adjusting medical equipment, fluffing pillows, placing her favorite stuffed animals exactly where she liked them. Every small detail carried enormous emotional weight. When we pulled into our driveway, neighbors were already waiting. Dozens of them. They lined the street holding handmade signs, balloons, and flowers. Several residents had organized a quiet welcome home gathering without telling us. Children from nearby houses held drawings they made for Emma, colorful crayon pictures of sunshine, hearts, and stick figure families. Nicole covered her mouth, overwhelmed with emotion. I carried Emma carefully from the car, while oxygen tubing trailed gently behind her portable tank. She looked smaller than she had before the incident, but her eyes were bright and curious as she studied the crowd. "Welcome home, Emma," someone called out softly. Applause followed, gentle, respectful, filled with genuine warmth. Emma smiled shyly and waved. And in that moment, Maple Creek finally felt like a real community. Life slowly rebuilt itself after that. The new HOA leadership operated with complete transparency, hosting open meetings where every financial record remained accessible to residents. Several neighbors volunteered to help families with medical or accessibility needs. The culture of silent compliance that Karen once enforced transformed into one of active support and accountability. Nicole eventually returned to her practice, though she began specializing more heavily in civil rights advocacy. She helped draft new homeowner protection legislation alongside state representatives who used our case as a catalyst for reform. As for me, I did return to the police department. but not as chief. I chose to step into a training and ethics advisory role instead. I spent my time teaching younger officers about power, responsibility, and the danger of overlooking smaller abuses before they evolve into something catastrophic. It felt right. One evening, nearly a year after Emma returned home, she and I sat together on the rebuilt front porch. The old wooden pillar, the one Karen had used, had been replaced during renovations. Nicole insisted on that. The new porch was stronger, brighter, and painted Emma's favorite shade of soft blue. Emma sat beside me wrapped in a blanket, her small fingers tracing patterns along the armrest. "Daddy," she asked quietly. "Yes, sweetheart. Why did that lady hurt me?" The question hit harder than any courtroom testimony ever had. I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. Some people let fear and greed make them forget how to care about others, I said gently. But that doesn't mean they win. They only win if good people stay quiet. Emma thought about that for a moment, then leaned her head against my shoulder. "We weren't quiet," she said. I smiled, kissing the top of her head. "No, y whispered. We weren't." Across the street, Mr. Finley rocked slowly in his chair, raising a quiet hand in greeting. Several children played in the cul-de-sac, their laughter echoing through the evening air. Nicole stepped outside, watching us with that calm, steady strength that had carried our family through the darkest days. The sun dipped low behind the rooftops, casting Maple Creek in warm golden light. For the first time in a long time, everything felt peaceful. Not perfect, but honestly. And sometimes that's stronger than perfection could ever be.